Last week, I had the honor and the pleasure of speaking with Takira Winfield Dixon about what it means to her to be an unapologetic Black woman. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, I encourage you to go back, but not before we get into this episode with Julia Becker Collins. Welcome to Diversity Dish, where we're dishing on everything diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice related. My name is Sedruola Maruska, and we're bridging the gap between what needs to be said and what needs to be heard. Those individual experiences that are often ignored or simply dismissed. Sometimes I'm dining alone, sometimes I'm dining with friends, and sometimes I'm dining a la carte. No matter how I'm dining, it promises to be delicious. Let's dig in. Julia Becker Collins is the hub on which vision advertising turns. As the Chief Operating Officer, she is responsible for everything from day-to-day operations to marketing and business strategy with clients. Under her leadership, this 100% women-owned and run marketing agency continues to grow. Julia is also the co-founder of the Metro West Women's Network and led the company as its first president for 2 years. In 2016, Julia was awarded the Distinguished Alum Award by the University of Massachusetts Amherst Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies Department. In 2019, she won the 40 Under 40 Award from the Worcester Business Journal. In 2020, Julia was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. The COVID-19 crisis complicated matters as she had to navigate the healthcare system and help ensure the financial security of vision advertising during the crisis. An avid endurance athlete before her illness, Julia works mid-treatment to rebuild. Hey, Julia, it's so good to have you. How are you today?
Thanks so much for having me. I am great.
Good to hear. We are on Diversity Dish, of course, as you know. And usually before I get into the bulk of what we're going to talk about, the entree, I'd like to talk about you. What are you passionate about right now?
Oh, what I am passionate about right now, I am training for a marathon right now, which in New England is a little crazy because it's about to get into winter and there's zero fun things about that in New England. I'm binge watching for probably the 4th time The West Wing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. I know. It's kind of like emotional therapy leading up to the election. Yes. And I am trying to spend good quality time with my 2 cats and with my husband. So those are probably the big things right now. So,
nice.
Yeah.
All right. It sounds really good to me. What is your superpower then? What would you call your superpower?
Oh, that is a great question. My superpower, I would say my superpower is the ability to stay calm during very stressful situations. I am really good at, if you have like an emotional, range of like 1 to 10, let's say, and, most people kind of go back and forth between like, something like a 2 to a 9, and depending on what happens during the day. I tend to stay somewhere, especially professionally, I tend to stay somewhere between like a 4 and a 6. So I'm very, very calm, even in the most stressful situations, because I run a marketing agency. We're not curing cancer over here. So it's really just, everything can be solved. And if it can't be solved, we can learn from it. And there's nothing worth crying over, and there's nothing worth losing your mind over. And let's just figure it out. I'm really good at problem solving and kind of breaking problems apart and figuring out how to move past them, rather than seeing like, okay, well, this is a disaster and we're all going to lose our minds. No, it's not a disaster. Let's just like let's just solve the problem. That's probably my
Right.
superpower, being incredibly calm during stressful situations. Yeah.
That's a good one to have, I think. So you did kind of mention that you're not over there curing cancer, but I do know that that is part of your story. So that's my next question for you. Can you tell us just a little bit about your story so that people can know how resilient you are, how tough you are?
Yes. So, like you said or briefly mentioned, I am battling cancer right now. So, at the beginning of the COVID crisis, I was not only working to stabilize the financial future of my company, just like so many people that are listening right now,
Mhm.
transitioning from an office to a work from home space and trying to make sure that the financial future of my company was set, applying for the PPP loan, helping my clients do the same thing, trying to put out additional content for small businesses to support them. Probably working more hours than I've ever worked in my professional life, to be honest. And being an extrovert, trying to deal with the fact that I was seeing nobody because nobody was seeing anybody at that point,
Right.
which is just emotionally incredibly difficult. I was also going through a personal struggle of the long and arduous process of the testing to determine that I had thyroid cancer. The timing was just insane that it started at the beginning of the COVID crisis. I had an appointment with my primary care physician, just an annual physical, like we
Mhm.
should all have. And
Mhm.
I almost canceled it because I was so busy with work. And I'm really grateful that I didn't. And I have a
Yeah.
great primary care physician, and she takes amazing care of me. And she was, she ran blood work and she did all the normal tests, and she was feeling my neck, just like, they check the glands and they check the thyroid, and they do a breast check, and they do all, they listen to your heart and kind of all the different things. And she was feeling
Mhm.
my neck, and she looks me dead in the eye and she says, "You have a mass on your throat." And I was like, okay, that's not good. Like, it's never,
Right.
she got real quiet. She said that, and she's like, okay. So she's holding my throat, and right where your Adam's apple would be if you were a man. She goes, "I
Mhm.
need you to swallow for me." And so I
Mhm.
swallowed,
Mhm.
and she says, okay, so that's your thyroid. Your thyroid is a butterfly shaped gland that is where your Adam's apple would be if you're a man. And
Mhm.
it moves when you swallow. And so she could tell it was the thyroid that had the mass on it. And she said, okay,
Mhm.
it could be benign, happens to lots of women, mainly
Mhm.
women actually get masses on their thyroid. Just like you could have a benign cyst in your breast, it could be a fatty mass. Who knows? But we're going
Yeah.
to send you for an ultrasound. So the
Right.
next week she sends me for an ultrasound. It was on a Friday. I'm, chatting with the ultrasound tech. And then the ultrasound tech got real quiet and they can't say anything to you. And that's how
Yeah.
you know there's a problem.
That's how you know.
Yeah, that's how you know. And then that day, that same day, and it was a Friday, and my doctor calls me after 5 p.m. And anytime a doctor calls you after 5 p.m., you know it is a real big problem. And she calls me and she says that the results are concerning and she wants to send me for a biopsy. And her office would call me on Monday to schedule the biopsy. But over that weekend is when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts shut down for COVID.
Yeah.
So nobody called me. So I never
Ugh.
got the call to schedule the biopsy. So now I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, not only to help my company and to run the company and to, renegotiate all the things I manage with the company and to help my clients, et cetera, et cetera. I'm now also trying to figure out how to deal with hospital systems and get this testing done. The hospital system that my doctor was in was hit so hard by COVID that they couldn't even schedule the test, let alone get the test done. And I'm sitting
Wow.
here going, oh my God, I could have cancer. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
So I got in touch with my cousin, who is an oncologist in Colorado. I sent him the ultrasound results, and he helped me figure out what kind of doctor, what kind of specialist I should be seeing. I transferred all my records over to an endocrinologist at a different hospital system who was able to schedule a telehealth appointment with me almost the next day.
Mhm.
She looked at the ultrasound results. My cousin looked at the ultrasound results. They both said the same thing, that I had a 98% chance of it being benign, but they both said, absolutely, you should get the biopsy done. Fine,
Mhm.
great, let's do it. I get the biopsy done the next week. Now we're in late April at this point. I get the biopsy done, and the doctor, the endocrinologist, calls me the next day after 5 p.m. Again, very bad sign when your phone rings after 5 p.m. from a doctor. And she says that, unfortunately, it's come back as cancer. I had a 3-centimeter mass on the left side of my thyroid. It had spread to the right side of my thyroid. They're going to have to remove the entire thyroid. And the protocol for treating thyroid cancer is that they start with surgery. They can't start with radiation. They can't start with chemo. And so they needed to start with surgery, but the whole state had shut down for surgeries.
Right.
And so I couldn't even schedule the surgery. So now I'm sitting here, literally sitting here in this chair, because this is now the, central command of,
right, because now
vision
everybody's at home.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all in quarantine. We're all working from home. I basically hadn't seen another person except for my husband in like 2 months at this point.
Right.
And I now know I have cancer, cannot get the surgery done to treat the cancer, and still trying to deal with all of the ins and outs of managing the company and transitioning the company and applying for the PPP loan, which is just a complete nightmare, and all at the same time. So it was just a huge level of stress. Excuse me. But after I got the diagnosis, I started creating a transition plan for leadership for interim power while I was out, because I knew eventually I was going to go out on leave.
Sure.
And so I started working on that plan. And so once the governor announced that the state was open for surgeries, my surgeon called me and said, do you want the first surgery the first day that surgeries are open at MGH, Massachusetts General Hospital? I said, absolutely. Yep. I want the first one. So I had 2 days he called me on a Wednesday. I had the Thursday and the Friday to call all my clients, tell my staff, implement the transition plan, and move everything over, and then cut myself off completely. And one of the best things I did was, when I implemented the transition plan, is that I said, absolutely no way, nobody can contact me. There is no reason to contact me. I need to get better. And the most important thing I can do right now is get better. And there should be no reason to contact me while I'm out. I plan to come back. I will be coming back. You just need to let me deal with this.
Good
so
for
I
you.
was out. Yeah, it's a really hard decision to make, but I think it's the right decision to make as a leader. And I was out on leave for 3 months while I had surgery, and then I recovered from surgery. And then after surgery, they did pathology on the tumors, and they found that it was more aggressive than they originally anticipated. They also found during surgery that it had spread past my thyroid and it had entered the lymph nodes. And so they had to take out some lymph nodes. Yeah. After surgery, I went for radiation, which is terrible. And I don't think anybody quite tells you how bad radiation is. It's really quite bad. And so that took me a very, very long time to recover from. And then I came back to work at about the 3-month mark, but I came back part-time. And I'm just about full-time now, but I'm not at the point I was before. I just don't have the energy I had before.
Right.
It's a really, just like we were talking about before the show, my body's different. Things feel different. My body needs different things, and every day is a different struggle. And so obviously we're still in quarantine and things are still different. And it's a different struggle than it used to be. It's the difficulties of running a company during a pandemic, plus having this
having cancer on top of it.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm having a very interesting 2020. Maybe that's the best way of saying it.
I think we're all having a very interesting 2020. I think 2020 is hitting people in different ways, so many different ways, and we can't even begin to understand each other's stories until we're able to come together and go, well, this is what happened to me during the time that I was away from everybody. And this is what happened to me. And this is how I dealt with it. And that's when we're really going to be able to see just how impactful all of this that's going on is. I said to my husband the other day, I said, I think we're all in a collective state of anxiety. we're probably at different levels, but we are all experiencing this very steady stream of anxiety that is really strange, because I don't think that it's been that way before, not in our lifetimes. Right?
Yeah, I saw something, I think it was earlier in the pandemic when it was the early stage of the riots and the kind of social justice, the wave
Yeah.
during the pandemic. And somebody was saying, well, we're all in this together. And somebody else said, it's not that we're all in this together. It's that we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And I
Right.
think that's a really smart way of saying it. It's like, yes, we are all in the same storm. And I don't think there's actually ever been another time in history where we're all in the same storm. But my boat is really different than your boat. It's not better.
Sure.
It's not worse. It's just a really different boat. And somebody else
It's
has a
different.
way worse boat than mine. Somebody else has a yacht. Somebody else has a life raft. Like, it's
Right.
just,
Yeah.
and it's just to be cognizant of that, because I think people are forgetting that everybody's situation right now is really different. People's financial situations are really different from each other. People's home situations are really different. If you had a very difficult home situation and now suddenly you can't leave your home, that is a
Mm,
really big stressor. So,
absolutely. Yes.
yeah, I think it's, I get a lot of people saying to me, oh my God, you have the most difficult situation I've ever heard of. And I just really try to say, like, it absolutely is not the most difficult situation right now. Absolutely not. It is no
Right.
way. There is no way I have the most difficult situation. It is
Right.
a difficult story in like a sea of difficult
See,
stories right
yes.
now.
Yes. I just read an article that was talking about how the writer, she says, her mother had just passed on, and she was going to work, and her boss looked at her and said, well, make sure that you leave that grieving at the door. And so her article, it was about race relations, and it was about how the Black community right now not only is experiencing this pandemic with everybody,
Yep.
and I'm Black and brown people, but not just experiencing this pandemic, but they're also experiencing this emotional trauma as
Yes.
well, as in
Yes.
watching different people get gunned down or snuffed
Beaten.
out
Yep.
right in front of us, and having to navigate the feelings that brings up, or the fact that people that you feel afraid for. So there's that anxiety, there's the anxiety about the pandemic, there's fear and real angst about who's going to be next and why, when there's really no real reason. And all of this comes together and creates a situation where many companies who are mostly white don't understand the trauma that is happening. And therefore, it's almost like, well, oh, you're back now, so you must feel better, and let's just get on with the way things are. But you and I both know, even you're going through something, it doesn't just go away. It's
Correct.
there, and it's something that you have to address and allow to clear before you can say, yeah, everything's good, because this is not right.
Correct. I mean, I think you're raising such a great point. I think, it's a really privileged position to come in to work and say, you should leave that trauma at the door. I think that,
Right.
we, as, coming from a privileged position as a white person, we need to acknowledge the fact that you're even able to say that.
Right.
That as an employer, that's horrifying that people say that. It's just, I think, in addition to that, my hope would be that as employers, we recognize, and I don't know if people are actually recognizing this, but I would hope they are, that not only is there a trauma that people are suffering right now, people of color, Black and brown people, marginalized groups, there is trauma that has been suffered for generations.
Yes.
And that this is
generational.
like, it is a generational trauma. It has been a current that has been running through the generations and has been existing for people every single day of their lives. So you are coming to work every day experiencing trauma before this. And
Of
now
course.
it is literally in everybody's face.
Mm-hmm.
So people are discovering racism for the first time, which is, to me, amazing that they're discovering it for the first time. But it's also great that they're
Yes.
discovering it. Like,
Right.
I
It's
think
like
it's
this two-edged
fantastic.
sword. Yeah. It's like,
Correct.
oh,
Correct.
it's been here, but okay, I'm so glad your eyes are open
I
now.
am. Totally. And like,
Yeah.
for example, like I follow a lot of people in sports and athletics, and they tend to be white, right? So I do CrossFit and I do running, two very, very, very white sports. And somebody that I follow in CrossFit who is very, very well known and has a huge following. Right after what happened with George Floyd, he put out this like 10-minute video that was unedited. It was just him speaking into the camera on Instagram. And I give him a lot of credit for this, where he just said, I thought racism wasn't a problem anymore. I
Mm,
was wrong. I
mm,
take the responsibility for that.
mm-hmm,
And here is how I want to learn from that.
mm.
And I have to say, with the audience he has, I was hugely impressed. And I
Wow.
was like, this is a
Mm-hmm.
moment where, like, I am shocked you didn't think there was racism. But like, for you to publicly use your platform to say, I was wrong,
Yes.
here's how I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I run multiple companies, and here are the steps I'm going to take to deal with this professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And as a social media, air quotes, influencer,
Influencer. Yeah.
I want to use my platform to say, we have a problem. We
Mm,
have a serious problem. And here is how we need to talk about it. I don't know the solution, but
mm-hmm.
talking about it and recognizing it is one of the ways. And I was really impressed by that because,
Mm-hmm.
me screening from the rafters, the like
Mm-hmm.
progressive liberal
Mm-hmm.
Jew from like the New York area, it's not gonna, nobody wants to hear from me. You don't want to hear from me.
Oh,
But I
gosh.
think when it's coming from, a cisgender white heterosexual man who's, incredibly privileged, who has a huge
Mm,
platform, that's a really big deal.
yeah.
So,
Sure. Sure.
but on,
And that's, and honestly, a lot of the change has to come from there,
mhm, it
because
really does.
a lot of the trauma that has been inflicted over the years has come from there. So
Absolutely.
that, someone said to me the other day on Instagram, and this is how you always know that you've kind of crossed some kind of threshold, is when somebody comes for you after you say something.
They at you.
They come, yeah, I posted something about, when people say I'm not racist versus being an anti-racist.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
posted, several things there. And one of them was, I said, I think people who say that they're not racist and do nothing are part of the problem, because they're the ones who are sitting there and they're going, racism doesn't exist. You're just making it up in your mind. They're the ones who are gaslighting us and who are, doing all these things. And this person, where did he come? He said something to me, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, he's gaslighting me. Like he said, calm down. That's like
Oh,
as if I was upset, like I was doing something, right? So I just wrote something. You don't know me, but you just told me to calm down. Gaslight
right.
101.
As my husband says, never in the history of being told to calm down has anyone
Has
ever
anyone
calmed
calmed
down.
down? Absolutely.
Correct.
Yeah. So, so for him, he was like, well, I didn't do anything, so why should I hold the responsibility? I said, no, you didn't do anything, and you don't hold the responsibility right now if you didn't do anything. But you know what responsibility you do have is to fix what's already been messed up, so that going forward, it can be better.
You have the
You know,
responsibility as a member of the society to learn
society,
about the problem so that in the future you can make better
you
decisions.
can make it better. And I thought,
Exactly.
how is that not clear? Like, I don't know, but
I
as
I get it. I do. I understand. I sit here and shake my head and go, okay, well, I'm going to move on because I can't fix everybody. So I can have conversations like this, which is
sure,
amazing. It makes me happy because then I realize I'm not the only one sitting here realizing that gender equality and racial equality and anti-racism and all these things are
the
incredibly important, but
right,
you only have so much energy in the day. So,
absolutely. And that's why I say to people, I say all the time, like, I do not argue with people who have shown me that they don't have the capacity for a discussion. They want
Exactly.
to argue. They want to argue in the light that they are right.
Correct.
Basically this
Absolutely.
person kept coming at me, saying, well, why do you put the X in women? It's not, correct in, grammatically or what have you. And then he's like, I'm not, and I just stopped talking.
Right.
I just let him talk because I'm
Right.
like, you know what? Clearly he needs to feel his importance and he needs to talk. Let him talk. The minute he attacks me, really, like viciously, or someone else, he's out of here, because I can't have that. I'm going to allow people to have discussions with you, but once you attack somebody, you're out of here, because we have to have discussions. You have to learn how to have a conversation or a discussion versus.
Absolutely.
So as the COO of a marketing agency that I know is working and creating a team of inclusivity, what do you propose other companies do? Like, I feel companies like yours are like an island unto themselves.
I feel like we are sometimes.
Yeah. I want it to not be an island. I want it to be more of a continent. And then
I know. I'm
the
trying.
island, right?
Yeah.
So what advice, what are companies missing in terms of being able to develop or grow truly inclusive companies?
I think there's a lot of things that we as leaders could be doing better to be more inclusive. I think a lot of it starts at the top. I think some of the problems stem from a real difficulty in understanding that it's not a me society, it's an us society. In marketing specifically, there is this old idea that it's hugely competitive and you can't talk to your competition, and I'm out to get you, and it's incredibly cutthroat and never, ever, ever refer business. And it's at the top tends to be an all boys club, not lower down in a company. So to be a woman in executive leadership at a marketing agency is unusual. There are women in executive leadership at marketing agencies. It's just more unusual. And if you are a woman, you tend to be older and you tend to be incredibly cutthroat. And I give those women a lot of credit, but it's also incredibly white. It's a very white industry. But it's also created this idea that we don't talk to each other. And we only hire people. I mean, I think this is a problem in general in corporate America, but we only hire people that look like us and act like us and are like us. And, if you ever watch the show Mad Men, it's a lot of that, right? I'm going to hire this guy that was in my fraternity at this Ivy League school because where you went to college means so much, and blah, blah, blah. And, I have been doing this a long time. I'm 39 years old. I've been at this company for 4 years, and I've been in executive leadership for a very long time. I have been in management and leading teams my entire career. And I am here to tell you, it absolutely does not matter if you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a PhD. It matters how well you do your job. And there are skills and traits for doing an amazing job at a marketing agency or at other corporations or nonprofits that have nothing to do with where you went to school or if you went to school. And it is something that is a huge set of blinders up for a lot of people at corporations. And I just don't know where this idea came from. I'm going to definitely ruffle feathers with this, but I just saw this post. It makes me crazy
when people ruffle feathers.
I'm going to ruffle some feathers. It's fine. So we do not require a bachelor's degree to work at Vision Advertising. It depends on the position. We require a certain amount of, work experience, because my feeling is you have to have a certain amount of maturity, right? So there's certain things you have to learn. And you have to be able to keep up. And I don't care if you did that at work or at school or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. And we're very open about that. I have a master's degree, but that's what worked for me, and that's not for everyone. But I just saw this post in Boston Businesswomen, which is a very large online Facebook group, that talked about how it's a job posting, and there was a long conversation under the post about how they wanted to know why the position required mandatory a bachelor's degree. And I don't know if you
Right.
saw this post, and it was a long conversation about it. And the CEO who had posted the job said, well, my investors are going to require this. I have a bachelor's degree, and I don't understand why you would even question it. Why is this something that you wouldn't want? And in my mind, this is a barrier to entry for diversity. And this is a real problem. Not everyone has access to go to a 4-year college, and not going to a 4-year college does not make you better or worse for a job. It's
Right.
just,
This is definitely something that I like to talk about. It's because I think that there's this disconnect between having this bachelor's or having, this certain thing here, it versus having the talent to be able
correct.
to do the job. It is so
Absolutely.
much more important to find someone who, like you said, has the talent and has the maturity to do the job than it is to find someone who has a bachelor's. But understand also that some of those requirements are only put on at a certain level and only to weed out certain people, air quotes, right?
Absolutely.
Because
I completely
did
agree with
speak
you.
to someone that said that, oh, the CFO thought that this guy had a penchant for numbers and made him the CEO. No, the CEO thought this guy had a penchant for numbers, made him the CFO. He did not have a degree in that area. He didn't even have experience in that area, but he was like, oh, he's good with numbers, put him in there. This other guy, oh, he's really good with people, put him in HR, make him the vice president of human resources. So that requirement, quote unquote, is only there to say, well, you don't have this. It is not
Correct.
necessarily there to say, well, you have this specific thing, so now we're going to put you in this specific position.
It's really, there's this idea that, and I don't, I'm not a white man, so I can only theorize, but I think there's this idea that like, well, I went to these schools, so, and I'm good at my job, so I'm only going to hire from these schools, or, somebody with this background. Right. I worked at a company where I was the only person who had ever worked at the company who did not go to private school.
Wow.
I went to public K through 12, public college, public school for my master's degree. I'm a child of the public school system through and through. So is my husband. We preach the public school. Like, I am all about the public school. I volunteer for Framingham State University. I volunteer for UMass Amherst. I am all about public school because, that's the most accessible way to get an education. So I was the only person that had ever been hired at this company. And this is not a new company. This company's been around for a long time. Only person who had ever been hired who didn't have a bachelor's degree from a private university and went to private high school. I don't have either of those things. I don't know why that would ever be something that should make you better at a job. And then once I got into the position, I realized that, okay, now keeping in mind your listeners can't see me, I am as white as they come. And I was the diversity hire because I went to public school and I was a woman. I was literally the diversity hire, and they were putting me on senior staff because it was a all white, cisgendered, heterosexual Christian male staff. And so I was the token hire. Right. And that is a problem. Like, that is a problem of epic proportions. And when I got in there and we started doing more hiring, and I started, I was involved in the hiring process. These weren't people that were going to work for me, but they consulted me because I was on senior staff. And I remember talking to the CEO, and he was like, well, we don't want to hire this person. Literally said to me, we don't want to even talk to this person. They went to public school. And I was like, I don't know, how is that even a consideration? He's like, well, I went to private school and I just think you get a better education. I go, I went to public school.
You pay more money.
Right. I literally, my husband went to Holy Cross for 1 or 2 years and he hated it. So he left. And he ended up at UMass Amherst, which I think at the time was like a quarter of the cost, and he loved it. It's just, I mean, in my opinion, you get personally, and I'm biased, but I think you get more out of a public school education because you learn to work for what you're getting and you have to work the system and it's not all handed to you. But hey, I'm all about public school education. So what do I know?
You might be
But
able
I
to
also
match.
have people that work for me that went to private college, went to public college, didn't go to college. I've had interns at all different levels that dropped out, that came back. I had a girl that worked for me, this is a long time ago, who was a co-op student where you're required to have an internship, full-time internship. You're doing that instead of going to your classes that semester. She was at Wentworth University, which is a very expensive private university in Boston. And she was really struggling to pay the bills. She was from the inner city and she was just really, really struggling to put one foot in front of the other. And she ended up dropping out of school in her senior year and we hired her. And and she never got her bachelor's. And I think she should have finished or gone to community college and finished or something just to like wrap up the bachelor's because she had put so much time in. But that's what worked for her. And there's just no one solution to this. When you hire people, you need to be hiring them for the skills they bring to the job. I think one of the things that happens when people do hiring is they're looking for this one-to-one solution for, you used to do this other thing, so I could bring you in to do this new thing, but that's just never the case. I look for a personality match. Are you going to work well with the team? Are you going to work well under my leadership style? Because that's a really big thing. I think that's something that's not often talked about in hiring. I look for people that are really great at learning and solving problems. And that has nothing to do with the job you previously had. I look for people that are great writers, strong copy editors, understand what an Oxford comma is, that can speak truth to power, that are not afraid, that want to have a voice in a meeting, that want to bring new ideas to the table. I don't care if you used to work at Michael's and stocked picture frames. Do you have a really good eye for things? Do you have a creative thought? One of the best people that work for me never had a corporate job before, ever, never. He used to work in the deli department at a restaurant. He is an amazing technical writer, and he's been promoted multiple times. And I literally could not run the company without him. And he never had a corporate job before he worked for us.
Right. See, yeah. And that, I think it's so clear sometimes. Yeah, I was thinking the other day how crazy unfair, or how crazy it is that people don't notice that if someone does not have the ability to pay the money that it takes to pay to go to a private college, then they believe that that person doesn't have the talent that they need, which is crazy. But this is where a lot of companies get stuck. You take the law firms or the accounting firms or the medical profession, you take these professions and they're all going to let's say they want to hire some Black employees. Well, we're going to the HBCUs because we know that there are a lot of Black students there.
Yep.
That the pool for the people that they're looking for is very small in those schools, because those schools are a very small section of the Black community. They won't go to the community colleges where people are going so that they can get their education, because they know that they have the gumption and the will and the drive and the talent to do certain things, but they're not going to go to those schools because of the stigma, air quotes, that has been placed on those schools. So now they're like, well, we just can't find the diverse talent. It's like, well, because you're looking in the wrong place. One. Number two, well, we don't want to have to lower our standards, which is code for we don't want to hire anyone who hasn't gone to some private school that they couldn't pay for. Well, that's a bias. That's totally wrong, because what makes you think that you have to lower your standards in order to go to these other places to get these students, to get these talented people? It blows my mind that there's no connection. Their connection is never made with that. I said to someone that things have changed. Some people never went with those changes. They only adjusted the language and the ways that they still executed what they wanted to execute. And some of what we're talking about right now is some of that. Oh, well, if they didn't go to this particular school, they must not be able to actually do what we want them to do.
Keep up with it. And it's like, okay, so if you're looking for a larger, like a quote, more diverse intern group for your accounting firm or your, corporate whatever firm, but you're only recruiting from Ivy League for your internship for the summer, and that internship is a feeder for a job, well, then of course you're only going to get the people that have access. And I think access is a huge thing, access to and financial ability to pay for an Ivy League education. You're missing out on a large population of people that just do not have access to, for a variety of reasons, to that kind of education. And not for nothing, I don't actually think the smartest people go to Ivy Leagues. You have the people that test the best that go to Ivy Leagues. I basically almost didn't graduate high school. I'm an incredibly bad student, really, really terrible student. I am not built for school. I have a master's degree, but I am a really bad student. I'm also a really bad employee. I'm a much better leader. So, you look at me now and I'm almost 40 and I lead a company and I have this, amazing CV and I'm all accomplished, but I am here to tell you that it is not a straight path, and you do not have to have, 17 different extracurricular activities and all of these, Ivy League this and that. And it really was not that pathway for me. But what I am incredibly privileged to have is I'm white. I have a white sounding name. I do not have a Jewish sounding name, even though I am Jewish. I pass looking not Jewish, and I'm incredibly well spoken. So those are things that I should not take for granted. And if you have things where you can quote pass, those are a privilege. And, I think talking about bias, there's so much bias in looking at resumes and being like, well, that person's name, I can't pronounce it, and I don't want to hire somebody whose name I can't pronounce. And, they're going to have an accent and I'm not going to understand them, and da 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 da. And it's like, well, have you been on the phone with them? Have you been on the phone with them? Have you talked to them? Do you know if they're amazing or not? There's so many things that employers are not considering. And I think, unfortunately, another thing that happens is that, and this happened to me when I was trying to switch industries, is that, you're applying for big jobs or at big companies, and they're using programs to match words from your resume to the words in the job description. And if you are not a one-to-one match, then you're just put out with the trash, which is not giving you the best match necessarily. You're just getting somebody who used to do the job.
Right.
So
yeah, it's sad. And I understand that HR they get tons of resumes that they have to sift through. But at the same time, I feel like that's your job.
Absolutely.
And so if this is something that's important, it's important to get as many people across the board that you can find, and to sift those jobs, those resumes through specific criteria, not how the name sounds, not if they have, the specific type of education that you're looking for, but more so, I want to see more resumes go through that have more of an idea of what a person is capable of doing. The resumes, I think resumes are gradually changing, but they still want you to list all the things that you did at your previous job. What I prefer is to say, okay, list the talents that you have, or list the abilities that you believe that you have, and why. Like, where did you get this ability? Because you know what? For me, I've been planning events for my family for years, right? I've never done it necessarily professionally. So it doesn't necessarily show up on my resume, but I'm really good at it. So it's one of those things. It's like, so can I just put that on there? Maybe I should put from, the time I was 14 to the time I'm like to present. I've been event planner for, my I don't know. But it's just, you just wonder, how do you get these resumes through these filters that are put in place to keep them out?
I think it's hard. I think a lot of it, when I have conversations, I usually tend to talk to young women because I have a lot of conversations with women's groups, but just in general, the conversations I have, these days, I think the system has to be changed. But I think one of the more direct ways to bypass that is a lot of networking, a lot of conversations personally with people, get in front of the right people. And these days, there's more options to do that, through social media, through introductions, going on webinars, following up with people. I think there's a lot of tenacity you need to have as an individual. I had a job when I was earlier in my career that I got, and I really think it's the job that jump started me. I worked for 5 years as a professional event planner and marketer, fundraiser for a large nonprofit in Boston. I had 0 years experience, none. It was not the beginning of my career, but I had no experience. And when I applied, I was like, listen, I said in my cover letter, I don't have any professional experience doing this, but in college, I spent, this amount of time planning events and I did this and I explained, I like walked them through the transferable skills. And there was somebody on the other end reading it like a real live human being reading the cover letter. And they were like, okay, let's have this conversation. And I just need you to get me on the phone. Once you get me on the phone, I'm a lock. I'll get the job. And so I think the thing that happens as somebody who's applying for the job is sometimes we focus so much on creating this very corporate resume, but yes, you should create like a good standout resume. But I also think the cover letter, don't do a formulaic cover letter. You need to do something that really says like, I acknowledge that my resume might not show that you're looking for this, this, and this, but here are the transferable skills I have. You really need to make yourself stand out. Now, as an employer, one of the things I always look for is, are you following the guidelines I asked you to follow? Because following instructions is almost more important than did you spell things correctly? Like if you are not sending me what I'm asking you to send me, I don't even want to have the conversation with you. Like if I ask for 5 references and you're sending me 2 references, you're out with the trash. Because following instructions, more important.
Because it's something that is part of the position or the job. It's so important.
Exactly. Following instructions. I would say we're a marketing agency, so design and creativity is so important. Do you have a professional headshot for your LinkedIn profile? Now, it doesn't have to be somebody took a professional headshot. You could have somebody with an iPhone use portrait mode and take a nice photo of you. But are you taking yourself seriously? And you have a nice photo. It's, there's just a lot of ways to set yourself up to look good. And I do not care. Again, I do not care if you went and got a bachelor's degree. I've had lots of great interns and different people at different points in their career intern for me or work for me with different degrees of education and formal education. And some people with the most amazing private school education have been horrendous interns. And some people with like far less formal education have been some of the most amazing interns. So, but it's much more about that professional presentation and being transparent in your communication and being a great communicator. But really, is it a 1-page resume? Is it a 1-page cover letter? Are you following the directions? Like to me as an employer, that is so much more important. I had somebody apply for a job a couple of years ago, and she built a website for the job application. And it was not an entry-level job, and she was entry-level. And I ended up hiring her because it was such a great and creative way of applying for the job. It's just, you can get, I think as the person applying, you just need to how can you show that you are the right candidate? So, and just, sometimes it's throw things at the wall and see what sticks. Unfortunately.
Well, hopefully, and hopefully what you're, the company you're throwing it at is looking for that is
correct.
Because if they're not looking for that, they're just going to say, oh gosh, no, let's keep moving. It's
correct.
It's really important who's on the other end.
Absolutely.
So that's, and that's the big challenge, isn't it? The big challenge is getting people on the other end to understand that there has to be a more open funnel than there is right now.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. I really agree with that. Yeah. And that there's really an importance to creating that larger funnel.
So how are you feeling about the future of business in terms of, in terms of being more equitable and inclusive? Are you
Well,
feeling
am I feeling what?
optimistic, or are you
Well,
feeling are you feeling that maybe that there's more a shift to go in more of that direction, or what?
I try to be hopeful. Unfortunately, our country is going through such turmoil right now, and
Yeah.
strife, and like you said, trauma with
Yeah.
everything happening right now. But
Yeah.
I try to look at the silver lining, and the silver lining is this eye-opening experience, which I hope for some companies is authentic rather than just showcased, and that there's real actual investigation of how they can be doing more, both in terms of hiring, doing more for the current employees. What can they be doing rather than just saying, well, here's an email address and you can email us with your thoughts. And I hate it
Right.
when it is so awful, I have to say, when companies do that and they think they're doing something and it's really just putting it back on the
On the
traumatized person.
right.
It is,
Yes.
it
It's
is
throwing the ball
absolutely
there, and it's like, well, we sent them the email, but we didn't get any responses. Well, really?
exactly. Exactly. You're creating the expectation that the work needs to be done by the traumatized party. You're
Yeah.
re-victimizing somebody, and it is
Mm-hmm.
just not the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
My hope is that this ongoing conversation will continue the pressure on corporations to create more equitable hiring policies, more transparent and equitable workplaces. That's the hope. Obviously, I think that this country has hundreds and hundreds of years of racial inequality and trauma to deal with, and it's not
Yeah.
going to happen in
No.
9 months. So
No.
I
Yeah.
think supporting companies and efforts to authentically and really make some change is good. And I think understanding that people are going to make mistakes,
Sure.
and as long as the company is really authentically trying to do good work, it's
Yeah.
okay. People make mistakes. I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
It's just like that, that what I mentioned earlier, where the guy went on Instagram with his 10-minute video and really said, like,
Right.
I was wrong. Here's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
I think that's amazing. I think, people make mistakes, companies make mistakes. Just acknowledge the mistake. Don't try to cover
Right.
it up, and, pivot, and that's okay. It's very hard to take a large company and say, "Oh my God, we've been we've been incredibly racist in our hiring structures for 50 years. How can we fix that?" That's really hard. But that, just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do something about it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Just
So
because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Absolutely. And
yeah,
you also know that because you're training for what? For cross
right,
country
right. No, marathon. I'm training for
marathon.
a marathon. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. So, there
Yeah,
you go.
exactly. Exactly.
Oh gosh. So we've talked a lot about a lot of things. So we're going to wind it down a little bit here and
Sure.
just get back to, a little bit of a lighter feel for things.
Okay.
Yes, we're in the same state. Hopefully we'll be able to get together at some
Yes.
point, and we'll be celebrating. So let's say we're celebrating in like, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, because who knows when we're going to be out of lockdown. But
Yeah.
what will we be celebrating as far as you can tell?
Oh
Something
God.
has shifted. What are we celebrating?
In 2 years ish. Well, I would hope that we'd be celebrating a new president. But I don't want to jinx myself. I'm knocking on wood as I say that. I I would hope that in 2 years the world is safer. I would hope that we are celebrating being able to actually touch and be around other real live human beings that you don't live with. That'd be
Yeah.
great. I really miss
Mm.
people.
Yeah.
I miss
Yeah.
I would honestly celebrate wearing high heels and lipstick again and not wearing a mask.
Oh my
Um
gosh,
uh,
yes.
yeah, I mean, I think I would celebrate just like going to a cocktail party just for the sake of wearing the cocktail dress at this point.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that I think something like that, just to like have a sense of like, as much as I've been enjoying wearing sweatpants every day, I think I would enjoy like doing something else.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
with other people.
Definitely would be celebrating that for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so my final question that I like to ask all my guests is, what is your favorite dish? Food.
Oh, well, food tastes very different to me these days. Thanks to cancer.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. I know that
uh,
feeling.
yeah, it's tough. So I have a really good friend she owns her own business. She's really amazing. And she is, in addition to being a badass businesswoman, she also is a vegan, gluten-free. She's both vegan and gluten-free, and she is really an amazing chef, but not like professionally. And
Yeah.
I have celiac, and dairy does not agree with me these days. So she makes this vegan, gluten-free mac and cheese in like a casserole dish, and she sticks it
Yeah.
under the broiler and gets it all like burnt at the edges, which is my favorite thing in the whole
Yeah.
entire world. And it is my favorite thing. I think it's my favorite thing because I love mac and cheese, but I can't have mac and cheese anymore. So
Mhm.
it's really like yummy, creamy, comforting, like home cooking deliciousness. And it's like
Nice.
the most amazing thing in the whole entire world. And it just feels like, honestly, it feels like love. That's what it feels like.
Oh,
Because it's
wow.
made by a human, and somebody had to really put a lot of effort into it, and it's so like just warm. It feels like being wrapped up in an embrace. That's what it feels like.
Mm,
Yeah.
nice. I love it. That's awesome. Well, that sounds wonderful. And I hope you have a lot of that in your future that you can
Thank
actually
you.
taste, because I know that feeling too.
Yes. Yes.
Oh gosh. And I wish you continued health as you continue your battle. But thank you for taking the time to be here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been wonderful.
It has. So thank you.
Hey, did you enjoy that episode? If so, please be sure to subscribe, download, rate, review, and share. It would also mean the world to me if you became a patron over at Patreon. The information is in the show notes. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.